Advocacy Officer here at DRE. During this session, we will discuss the impacts of inadequate battery recycling, just as the challenges related to the sectors and the need for urgent action towards sound management of recycling of used and end-of-life batteries. At the end of the session, UNIDO will deliver a keynote presentation on advancing Nigeria's green and just transition to net zero through circular economy practices. So stay on for that. But first, I'd like to share a few slides with the audience here today to set the scene on the topic of today. Next slide, please. Next, please. Yes, so as you all know, batteries are used in many applications, so from cars to distributed renewable energy systems, such as, for example, clean energy mini-grids. As the proliferation of distributed renewable energy solutions inevitably increases to address the growing energy demand in Africa and to electrify the more than 675 million people lacking access to electricity, so will the demand for battery. This increasing demand will also lead to growing end-of-life battery volumes over the coming years, and that needs to be soundly managed and recycled. So next, please. Indeed, improving battery recycling in Nigeria specifically, raising labor and environmental standards and establishing sustainable trade flows for raw materials. These are the declared aims of a new project called Partnership for Responsible and Metal Recycling, or ProBaMet in brief. The project is supported by GIZ and implemented by the following partners. Could you put up the slide, please, again? Some of the partners are the Environmental Research Institute, Öko-Institute, who coordinates the overall project. Then the think tank SRADEV Nigeria, who's here with us today, as well as ARE is one of the partners, and Platform Blei, or Platform LED, if you like, an initiative of Wirtschaftsvereinigung Metalle, representing the non-ferrous metal industry. So to ensure the success of this project generally, it is very important to also work closely with associated partners, such as, for example, the Federal Ministry of Environment, NESREA, the Alliance for Responsible Battery Recycling, etc. Next, please. So with regards to lead acid batteries specifically, I'd like to just give you an idea of the impact of lead exposure based on the UNICEF report you see here. So in many low and middle income countries, unsound lead acid battery recycling is a major public health concern and has negative short, medium and long-term implications on health and well-being of societies, with children being the most affected population group. So according to the study, 1 in 3 children have elevated blood lead levels, and lead acid battery recycling is a leading source of that exposure. This reduces their IQ, among other negative impacts, and in the long run, costs low and middle income countries $1 trillion. So keeping in mind this dramatic impact on the health, as well as environment, and in the long run, individual lives and the economy, let us look into the world of lead acid recycling in a little bit more detail. Next, please. So we do definitely need recycling. However, in many regions of the world, recycling takes place in substandard, highly dangerous and unsafe conditions, exposing workers and neighboring communities to hazardous substances. And this does not only occur in the informal sector, but also even to a larger extent in the section here in the middle that you see in red, the low standard industrial smelting from licensed and registered recyclers. How come? Well, because in unregulated markets, low standard industrial smelting is highly profitable. Next, please. So now looking at Nigeria more concretely, you can see here an image of a large-scale recycling plant. You can see the cloud above it. This should not necessarily be the case. Those highly hazardous emissions of dust shouldn't escape the building. And, well, you clearly do no longer need any measuring instruments anymore to see the impact of it. Do note that this is a reoccurring phenomenon for some licensed and registered plants. And it's not only something for the informal sector, but yeah, so also for licensed plants. Most of these low standard industrial smelting plants would not qualify for sound management. And as you can imagine, it has grave consequences on its neighbors and workers in the region. Next, please. So the aim of this project, amongst others, is also to create a coalition, therefore, between battery users, such as actors in the decentralized renewable energy space, the lead-using industries, and national policymakers and regulatory authorities. Can the slides? Thank you. To ensure common standards that are respected and adhered to across the coalition, but also in part to assess the facilities together and raise awareness with the DRE sector on the impact of the choices that you make. So for decentralized renewable energy sector actors across the board, so it's really important to make sure you do not give your batteries to the low standard polluting recyclers, which you see here in the black, colored in black, but partners with the best available recycling facilities. So the sound recyclers, to ensure sound management of all batteries that are under direct control of actors. Thank you. Welcome, no worries. No worries. And the plants that are in gray in the image, so yeah, it's important to also nevertheless not discard them, but to work closely with them to ensure sound management. So for this project, next slide, please. So one of the first steps was to conduct a recycling plant assessment in 6 battery recycling plants located in Ogun State in April 2024, so a month ago. And together, the 6 plants that were visited, they form the bulk of the battery recycling capacity installed in Nigeria, just to give an impression. And all of them are mid or large-scale recycling industries. So the assessment that has taken place were jointly conducted with the Federal Ministry of Environment, the National Environmental Standard and Regulations Enforcement Agency, Ogun State Environmental Protection Agency, Lagos State Environmental Protection Agency, and the Alliance for Responsible Battery Recycling. So it was, as originally suggested, really in a way a coalition doing this, conducting this assessment. So as a result of the assessment, 5 out of 6 assessment plans show severe weaknesses in various technical and operational aspects of used lead-acid battery. And in the following slides, I'll just briefly show some of the images of the findings, in part contrasted, mainly some images with a little description for the people not in the recycling sector. Next slide, please. So here we can see evidence of an unsound storage and handling of lead material. So this leads to fugitive emissions, exposure of workers and communities, and it showcases dangerous working conditions because theoretically this floor should be completely empty, held clear, and ideally constantly held humid for the dust to settle rapidly and not whirl up at every passage. So next slide, please. So here, according to industry experts, you can see lax handling of highly hazardous filter plant dust. It should, however, not even be visible, this mountain of dust, as it contains 40% of lead oxide, which is which a human being, takes up really easily. So you can imagine the exposure that workers in that plant get. In the next image, You can see furnaces, which, well, a furnace rather, which is not housed in, therefore emitting a lot of lead fumes and dust, especially while tapping. So you can imagine, oh, next slide, please. This one, yes. So what you see is a situation of 5 out of 6 big plants here in Nigeria. However, the good news, there's still the 6th one. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this plant was assessed also, also remarkably different and uses sophisticated, up-to-date technologies and applies very high recycling standards. According to, or confirmed by industry experts, it's fundamentally better than the other 5. And green recycling is also here to discuss this a bit further. Excuse me, my notes flew. So, yes, thank you. So as you may have expected, the main aim here is to target or to move the things forward towards the high standard industrial smelting in the country. Next, please. So how to do this? 1, knowledge. So sharing the knowledge across all relevant sectors on including the decentralized renewable energy sector as to the impact of lead acid batteries, but also the recycling dynamics, let's say, currently ongoing. Secondly, push factors such as sanctions or to ensure standards that they're implemented. And thirdly, by ensuring that the companies who have invested in high standards, which obviously comes to a greater cost, are rewarded by giving them opportunities to recycle properly. So in this framework, next slide please, ARE has drafted a circularity guideline calling on the DRE sector to be aware of these consequences and to ensure that they procure batteries known for their durability and longevity to minimize early replacements. Also to employ repairable and recyclable system designs to reduce waste and replacement needs. Thirdly, also that at the end of their life, the sector ensures sound management of all batteries, and last but not least, to partner with best available recycling facilities in the country. So you can read the guideline using the QR code that's there. As said, it's a draft at the moment, and we would be very happy to receive feedback from the sector throughout, really across the value chain, as to your thoughts on those guidelines and how we could improve them for everyone to be able to endorse them. Yes, so that is basically what I wanted to share today, so thank you all. Now I'd like to move over to the panelists with a few questions. So, yes, Wissam Ramlawi. Yes. So I would like to ask, from the Green Cycler's perspective, what would you say are the main environmental and health hazards associated with improper battery disposal in the DRE sector?
Hello. I think this one is working now. First of all, thank you for visiting our facility. Thank you for what you discussed in terms of environmental, I would say, standard, what we have achieved in green recycling. I think the biggest challenge what we are facing in the country in terms of recycling is the informal sector and other recycling companies who have no respect for environment, no respect for their own workers. I mean, what you mentioned is very true. Everybody in the country is doing manual cutting. Everybody in the country is running their furnaces on the first available fuel. Nobody is checking their NOx level, their environmental emission, and that's what makes it difficult for us. Of course, our cost is much higher than everybody in the country. Our investment is much higher. And then becomes an issue of how we can get our feedstock. How can we run our facility with limited feedstock, because we're barely breaking even. And what's make it even worse is that people are still exporting batteries in Nigeria, which I don't understand how that's possible. People are exporting battery out of Nigeria to India, to China. We've seen record of this. We've investigated this. Nothing happened. So we have worked with Nasria. We are working with Nasria how to address that. And we're happy that where we are, the question, how can we maintain our feedstock to continue running, all right? So I don't know if I summarized the challenges, what we face, all right?
Very to the point. Thank you very much. Maybe from the other side of the spectrum, or not the spectrum, but another perspective in a way from the private sector in the DRE sector. So, Nicolas, what are the biggest obstacles, would you say, that are currently hindering the establishment of sustainable trade flows and for the use of batteries in the DRE sector?
Yeah, thank you, Julia. My name is Nicolas. I'm running a company called Asantys Systems, and we implement mini-grids all over Africa. So we did several hundred, more than 300 in the last 5 years. And I'm in the sector since 20 years almost. And since the beginning, I was thinking, hey, we are improving the world, yeah, by fighting poverty, but we don't take care of the consequences in the future because we are using batteries in rural areas. And I found out that after having delivered, we are not an operator, that in many places, batteries are just left somewhere. Yeah? And we found out that it went into the informal sector, yeah? And I know cases in West African country where 3,000 batteries are just lying around and illegally sent to not working facilities, yeah, and poisoning people. And we said we need to get a change in our mindset, because we, as an individual company, we are in competition, yeah. And if always the cheapest wins, yeah, a tender, he supplies and doesn't think of the consequences. And today it is not mandatory to take back the batteries in our projects. And as a member of the board of ARE, I thought it's a topic of our association to bring it out to the public, to say, hey, we have a problem because now we're doing 10 years mini-grids and the first batteries are coming back. So it is time to think, what do we do, and time to act. Yeah? The next generation of batteries in 10 years will have the same problem, and it is time to implement a process via our organization and partners, as you mentioned it, to bring it back. And we are kind of frustrated at the moment because we offered our services via good partners like Wissam, or we have a model to take it back to Europe. Yeah, this is costly. It's a huge administration problem. Yeah, and in the end, we cannot make money with it, but we have the obligation to do it. Yeah, and today, if we compete in a mini-grid bidding, we should not mention it, because if not, we would out of price. Yeah, and that's a critical part where donor organizations need to change the settings in partnership with the industry and the recycling industry, and best to do it in a good way, in local ways.
Thank you very much for that call also beyond, well, within the sector, but the supporting partners, let's say. Chukwuebuka, how do you, how do current recycling practices affect the financial viability, according to you, of DRE businesses, and particularly regarding battery replacement costs?
Okay, so basically, we have to look at it from different angles, but they are all linked together. Now, basically, we have the issue of contamination. Now, most of the time, a typical Nigerian still don't understand that when a finger battery is bad, that it has to be disposed properly. Now, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, so a typical Nigerian still don't understand the need to dispose a small finger battery properly. Now, what does this mean? What this means is basically that when that battery is disposed improperly, there is issue of contamination. Now, when there's an issue of contamination, so what it means is that for locations where those batteries were disposed, there is already issue of loss of materials that could be used to produce new batteries. Loss of material that could be used, that could be recycled back into the system. Now, when there's a loss of materials, what does it mean? What does it mean also is that there is loss in revenue. People doing business, nobody wants to be losing money. But of course, when you are losing money, when there is loss in revenue, what it means basically is that you have to incur all of those costs in the end product. And incurring all of those costs in the end product also means that the finished product, which is the battery you are going to produce, will still be expensive. Now, we also have the issue of paying for penalties. Now, when these products are not recycled properly, penalties are being paid for. So when penalties are being paid for, so what it means is that at the end of the day, the manufacturers are spending more. When the manufacturers are spending more, the end product, which is the product we are supposed to produce after the recycling, there is an increase in the cost of battery. So I think the basic thing and the key thing here is the contamination. So when a particular environment is contaminated, it goes a long way in affecting the process where we have the finished products. Thank you.
Yes, please.
I would like to add my 2 bit into this. I mean, I'm happy with what you mentioned, Nicolas, because if you look at the plastic recycling in the country and the mentality which is being pushed all over the world about plastic, it's very fascinating because now we're talking about extended responsibility. You as a manufacturing of this plastic, you're responsible for it for the lifetime of it. We don't have similar things. I agree with your pain when you are bidding and you're the only one who are worried about the extended responsibility of the batteries you're putting out in the field. And this is something where the investors, I mean, they can influence this. The investors who are coming in to fund those green projects, to fund these mini grids, they should say that, okay, we are putting this, we're funding those batteries, we're putting those batteries in Nigeria, we're putting those batteries in Togo, I don't know where. What's going to happen after 10 years? You are the one recipient of those funds. You should be committing that at the end of the 10 years, what you're going to do with those batteries. Are you going to give it to the informal market and then you're just going to be happy that there's some cash coming in? Or you're going to show us a certificate that you have really disposed properly of those batteries? I mean, this kind of thinking, I think ARE is the right platform to push it in. And I don't know if that's a possibility, but this is what we are trying to champion as a company. This is what we are discussing with Nestle all the time. And this is what we believe we can achieve eventually. All right.
Thank you very much for that.
Yes, I would like to add one sad point, yeah. It is not of interest of many people, yeah, because today we are in a booming market and first is to make cash, yeah. And what you say is thinking about tomorrow, and thinking about tomorrow is our obligation, yeah. But we cannot expect this from companies like ours, yeah, because we are small companies and we don't even know the cost of recycling in 10 years or 15 years. So it is an overall subject for investors, like you say, and I would say even for organizations and associations to develop a model, to develop a kind of a KPI, yeah, that can be used, how to recycle in 10 years and to get a price tag on it as well. Yeah?
We're not asking them to commit to a price or to a cost. We're asking them something very simple. You cannot throw it out of the window. You have to give it to a company which has been approved by the country where it is. I mean, this is the problem. Right now, people are selling their batteries with the first truck coming in, whoever is the first truck. But as an investor, you have the obligation to say, this material I put in there, I invested in it, I financed, I should be putting it, make sure that when they're disposing of it, they have to show me a piece of paper that they're giving it to the right company. I'm not asking you to finance that. It's not going to work. We all know it's not going to work in Africa where you will have the payment for that. We're not talking about that. And you never know what's going to be happening after 10 years. We don't know what battery technology will be in the next year. But the idea it should be, you put equipment out, you have to be forcing that you don't dispose of it somewhere we don't know where. It should be a company which has the authority to work, which is licensed to work. As simple as that.
Okay, so I think I have something to add here. I think one of the things we also need to look at is awareness and community engagement. You know, because basically there will always be sections like this, but the layman out there still don't understand the need to dispose these batteries very well. So there has to be a continuous community engagement. There has to be a continuous self-awareness for people to know that these are the consequences of their actions. Because by the time they know these are the consequences of their actions, they're already aware of the consequences in the next few years. So there is need for continuous community engagement, continuous self-awareness, so that people will know that this is not the proper way of disposing battery. If you walk outside the shelves of this place, you will still see that people are still disposing these batteries in the improper way. So what it means for us basically is that the developers, the layman, the people in the industry, there has to be this continuous self-awareness so that they understand the need to dispose this battery properly. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, with all of this, indeed, it's clear that it's a shared responsibility, as was mentioned earlier, and that everyone can play a part in this, in ensuring that the batteries are recycled in a sound way. How do you see looking forward? Because, for example, for us now, this ProBaMet project ends in roughly a year's time. But and until then, we'll definitely be very active to support this cause. But in the long run, and on a national or international level, how do you see potential for collaboration to drive this forward in the long run in a sustainable way? Any takers?
If I can answer, at least from the recycling point of view, I mean, we're ready. We have the capacity for 1 year and to go forward. And I think we're definitely interested in the feedstock. This is one of the biggest challenges we face right now. I just want to give like a small story. We had a customer, I remember now, we were called in to inspect some few thousand batteries. I don't want to give more details. From large companies, which is a recipient of IFC funding, recipient of multi-funding. And at the end, we didn't get the bid. And it's not like we didn't get the bid because we didn't bid properly. We bid the right amount. And somebody else with a lower bid get it. And he comes back and trying to sell us. I mean, this is the corruption element. This is the things how it happened. This is where I said, enough is enough. I'm going to go to Nasria. I mean, I'm very happy that you made this visit to Nigeria. I really want to invite you, like, don't just make one visit and then come back after 1 year and see what happened, because your presence really energized everybody in the industry. I mean, they said, now we're getting inspected. I've heard this so many times. We're getting proper inspection. So I invite you. Come quarterly for the next 1 year. It'll be very helpful if you can do that, because that will allow us at least for 1 year to have this push to see how we can improve. And I'm looking forward to work closer with you and with the whole organization, how we can improve. All right?
Yeah, I think we end here today also in a call to action, yeah? Because we're aware of the problem, we feel we have to do something, yeah? Today it was announced in Nigeria will have a funding for 1,000 more mini-grids. The first thing could be get a kind of regulation in there, which is easy to do and get assistance from the program, yeah? And today we are mainly here to get awareness for the subject. Yeah? Awareness is the first step that we have a problem. Yeah? And to pronounce it in front of a public is the first step. Yeah? And so I thank really ARE to take this initiative here in Nigeria. Nigeria is one of many countries in Africa, many countries worldwide. Yeah? So it's a worldwide problem. And in the end, also manufacturers of batteries need partnerships with recycling companies to take back the batteries at the end of their lifetime. Yeah? This can be a solution in the far future or in the near future. In Europe, we have such regulations for electronics, and this should be our target to get this somehow also into our industry.
Okay, so I think we can also look at it from the manufacturer's perspective. Now, basically, most of the batteries you see out there in the market, most of them, when you buy it, you that is buying it already know that this battery is not going to last. Now, what it also means is that there is pressure on the recycling aspect of the job. Now, what this means also is that we need to look at regulations that can monitor the type of batteries that are being sold within and outside the country. So what that means is that you are buying a battery and the person selling the battery to you already knows that this battery is not going to last, but they are selling it to make money. So government on its own part can have regulations where batteries that are being sold, we are sure that these batteries are going to last for at least a reasonable number of years before we now start talking about recycling them, and then it will also reduce the pressure that we have on the recycling industry as well.
That would mean that we need in tenders an evaluation of life cycle cost for the battery. Yeah? This would be fantastic if not the lowest price will win, but the best life cycle cost.
Yes, so yes, the best life cycle cost should be the key thing here, because and most of the time the best way to use a battery is to make sure there is the charging and the discharging aspect. But most of the time, because of maybe financial implications or financial burden, people might not be able to get the high standard quality battery, especially when some of these mini grids are being built. So what it means also is that the life cycle should be considered, and then also the quality of the battery that are being used in some of these projects should also be monitored as well.
Yeah, and if I may add, life cycle cost also depends on the power electronics that manage the battery. Yeah. So it's a mix of systems, it's very complex, and today we're in the beginning of getting awareness on the subject.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, we've had a lot of yes, good inputs and ideas to take this forward. I mean, indeed, you mentioned the life cycle, durability of the batteries, the extended responsibility beyond just the developers, for example, or the recyclers, the investors potentially as well, and so on. So thank you very much for that. It's also part of, as mentioned earlier, there's circularity guideline that we drafted. So please, anyone, feel free to have a look at that and get back to us with any other feedback you might consider, whether it's feasible to any extent or anything along those lines. But if I don't know if any of the speakers would have an initial comment, but I have.
No, we thank you, Julia, for putting this on the agenda and your hard work during the last days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the floor? Yes, please.
Yes, my question refers to the economic aspect of this. So it's an interesting project, and we see that we are all aware of the needs for battery recycling and having an industry for that. But my question is, what you have to be able to provide some insights in terms of minimum economic requirements to make this scheme feasible, replicable in other countries. For example, a minimum number of batteries that would need to be recycled every month for the perspective of the recycler, or minimum, let's say, cost for collecting battery from the mini-grid operator point of view, and then to be able to make this attractive economically. Thank you.
I'll give a general answer because that's very specific. But in general, if you look all over Europe, I mean, I think with the exception of Italy, you don't see like 5, 6 companies in one country. And you see more people involved in the collection versus the number of people involved in the recycling, which is here in Nigeria. I mean, you just heard there are 6 companies you visited. That means those 6 companies are registered with the authority. I don't think anybody knows how many companies are there doing the recycling. In general, for us, to give you an idea, we hope to get around 2,000 tons of batteries per month for us to be breaking even with our technology, which is, I'll be frank with you, we never got. And this is one area where we're approaching Nesria to see if we can bring batteries from neighboring countries, how they can support us to collect more in the country. I mean, we're paying the prevailing price. We know how things are. Nobody will subsidize us. We're not expecting anybody to subsidize us. So we're paying the prevailing price, but the number of the companies are a lot. And the number of people in the informal sector is much more than what we are all 6 companies recycling. And as I mentioned, the number of export is a lot. But in general, we need for you to have a company like this doing everything, you need to think about 2,000 tons. And you cannot do this outside Nigeria, for example, because if you look at all the neighboring countries outside Nigeria, first you don't have the fuel. You don't have the proper gas, you'll be running on diesel, and we all know the problem with that. And you won't have enough capacity, you don't have enough scrap in the market to do that. And this is one area where, this is one of the reasons we chose Nigeria to put this factory, because we thought that within the ECOWAS, we can do something like that. So far, we haven't been successful. Right? I hope I answered the question.
I can add something from our perspective. We supplied many mini-grids, and we had been having this awareness, and I have 2 colleagues, Stefan and Jad, who'd been working to make a model how to take back batteries from our customers. Yeah? And we had been operating these projects where we did the simulations were in countries where there was no recycling opportunity. So the collection was minimum of a 20-foot container to take the batteries back, ship them to Europe to a melting point, make the documentation, which is very costly. In the end, the simulation was giving a benefit maybe of 200-300 euro per container. Yeah? So it is not attractive for all the work. But it is feasible at 0 cost. Yeah? For the operator, but it should be an obligation, and that is missing at the moment, to just directly start.
Thank you. Any other questions from... Yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Deepak. I'm from the ARE. I do have a question because the topic is super interesting for myself. With all the challenges and problems that we identified in this session today, and by the way, thank you all the panelists for providing your insight, I'm thinking about the overall sustainability of the project. Now, when we are talking about battery recycling, or let's say reusing later on, how do you think the overall sustainability of a given project where the recycled batteries are being used are impacted when compared to a fresh project where new batteries are being used? What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not sure I understand the question correctly, but when what we produce, when we take in the batteries, we're going back to pure lead. We're going back to 100% pure lead. And on the other side, we go for 100% clean plastics. So the people who are buying my lead are companies in Europe, companies in the US, and those people are taking from us 99.99% of purity in lead. So, by the way, we have the highest purity in lead. We were able to achieve it, and that was the only way to extract more values from the batteries. All right, so there is no issue. People who are into the battery manufacturing, they will take this material and produce new batteries. People who are into the plastic, because some people are taking the plastic and reusing it for other application, because plastic coming out of the battery, if it's properly washed, that's the key word. If it's properly washed, it can be reused. There is no problem with it. So we're not into the business of reconstructing batteries. We're in the business of extracting raw material out of the batteries. I mean, this is one of the things we were thinking maybe when we were hoping for success in green, and we were hoping for success by now, because we expected that people will start moving to lithium ion, and we were studying those projects. But of course, we won't go there until we see there is success here. Okay, so I hope I answered your question.
Let me add to what you said. So I think basically we've come to understand as well that these end products that are being so the end product of these recycled batteries, you can actually use it to produce new batteries, and it's been observed that the finishing products are okay. Now, so what it means basically is that you have a bad battery, you are done recycling. The efficiency of using that recycled product to produce a new battery is 100% pure. So what it means is that there's also reduced pressure. Instead of going and start mining new materials to start producing new batteries. So basically, the recycled products of the dead batteries can be used to produce new batteries. And then we have also observed that they are 100% efficient and okay.
You mean to say like the new battery and the recycled, they're comparable in terms of efficiency?
Yes.
I mean the material used, it has two sources. Either what he mentioned is coming from the ore, from the mining process, or it's coming from recycling of the batteries. I mean, lead is one of those metals which is infinitely recyclable, because as long as you remove impurity, you can come back. So of course, every time we remove impurity, there are some losses will incur, because some lead will be trapped in those impurity. That's why it's very important what we mentioned, what Julia mentioned at the beginning, is that what we are doing, how we're disposing of our waste. I mean, this is quite important. But at the end, when it comes to battery recycling, we're all in the business of extracting the raw material back from the batteries. So, and of course, when you extract from batteries, it's cheaper versus extracting from the mine. And it has less environmental impact, because when you extract from the mines, you just have an open pit. So that's all the challenges will come again.
Well, thank you very, very, very much for all these insights. Has been really, really valuable. And I hope that the DRE sector has become a bit more aware now of the situation regarding recycling of their batteries, and that you will start looking more into how you can best dispose them, where you will dispose them, and how you put up a system that is durable in the long run and has less health and environmental impacts around the battery. Thank you. So if everyone would just like to remain here for another second, we have another keynote speech from UNIDO on advancing Nigeria's green and just transition to net zero through circular economy practices, please.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Oluyomi Banjo. You can call me Yomi. I'm the National Program Coordinator, Energy and Environment for UNIDO for the regional office for Nigeria and the West African region. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll be talking on our plans for introducing circularity in the power sector in Nigeria. So can I have my slide up, please? So the topic I'll be talking on today is advancing Nigeria's green and just transition to net zero through circular economy practices. Next slide. So that is my agenda. I'll try to be as fast as possible because I know the end of the conference is coming. So next slide. Okay, so there was a problem. Someone somewhere discovered that the world is getting hot. Water sources are outflowing their banks. It's difficult to determine planting seasons because weather patterns are changing, food security, and all was. And people came together to see, to sort of research and discuss what the problem is. Then the UNFCCC came up and countries came to the table to discuss, and issue of climate change was established. Next slide. So what did it land us? So we went from going from unsustainable sources of energy to sustainable sources. So it was determined that we stopped using fossil fuel-based source of energy and we moved to renewable source of energy. Next slide. So what are these source of sustainable or renewable energy? Majority are on my slide there. We have solar. We've discussed a lot about mini grids at this forum. We have tidal, nuclear, and everything, but I've also added hydrogen, green hydrogen, which we have just gotten approval to develop a green hydrogen project for Nigeria. Next slide. Okay, so we found the solutions for these renewable and or sustainable energy sources, but it's also coming with a problem. So years down the line, after finding these solutions, we realized that 10, 15, 8, 20 years after that, we have a problem on our hands. So we would have waste batteries, we will have waste panels, turbines, electrical and electronic waste, capacitors, and the rest. So what do? We try to solve a problem, but it comes with another problem. Next slide. So we all sit down, we sat down, and this calls for critical thinking. Next slide. Then we came up with this project, which is funded by the European Union. So UNIDO, the European Union, sat down with the government of Nigeria, and we said we will make Nigeria one of the novel countries to come up with a solution for looking at the waste that might be generated in the power sector. Next slide. So we recently launched this project. It was launched in February, so it has a timeline. It will run from January 2024 to December 2026, so with a duration of 36 months. And the country of implementation to be Nigeria. Like I said, European Union is the donor, and UNIDO will be implementing. Next slide. So what is the objective of this project? The objective of this project is to contribute to access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, and circular economy practices promoted to combat pollution and climate change and its impact in Nigeria. And its outcome is to improve the management of used off-grid energy equipment and plastics. So we just talked about batteries now. So batteries will also be one of the things we'll be looking at. Next slide. So what's the solution that we are bringing on board? It's also been talked about here today. Everybody's talking about it. The world is presently negotiating for a global convention on plastics. 4 intergovernmental negotiation committee meetings have been held. The last one held recently in Canada, 1 to go. So what is the solution that we are proposing? It's circular economy. Circular economy, it's an industrial economy where it returns products, parts, and materials into use several times along the value chain. So we have a life cycle of a product can be many times. It gets to the end of life, you return it back into use. So, and how is circular economy done is based on principles that products are designed to last. We've heard on the panel here today, whereby some batteries are intentionally bought or produced just for the economic purpose, but not really made to last. So value is maintained for as long as possible. Generation of waste and pollution is minimized by applying resource efficiency and cleaner production practices, and renewable energy is used as much as possible. So what are the enablers of circular economy? You have innovation. For you to have circular economy, you have to innovate. Digitalization, stewardship, partnerships, and collaborations between businesses, governments, and consumers. If you look at that diagram today, it was recently updated by UNIDO. So if you've been familiar with it, this is recently updated and it was released in March. Next slide. So who are going to be under this project? Who will be the actors and the benefits? So the actors, circular economy actors, are consumers, businesses, and governments. Role of government, we've heard about NESRIA today. We are going to be working very closely with the government. So one, government is to create favorable conditions to enable consumers to buy more circular products. So which means there has to be issues, we have to look into issues on legal and enabling, legal and regulatory framework, especially around the issues on electrical and electronic waste, batteries, panels. The presentation, please. No, please go back. Yeah. So I've listed some economic benefits, environmental benefits, and social benefits. I'm trying to save time. Next slide. So who will be the project partners for this project? The main federal government counterparts will be the Federal Ministry of Environment, the National Environment Standards, Regulations, and Enforcement Agency. If the regulatory and legal framework is not enforced, it would not work. We have heard from the actors, from one of the actors here today, how there's a bit of frustration, and this further makes us realize that there has to be a structure around the management of these materials in the country. So we have the Federal Ministry of Power and the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Investment. So what we have also done is we have identified initial states. So we've been engaging those state governments. So 8 governments were initially identified, and those are the states up there: Ogun, Lagos, Ondo, Anambra, Rivers, Abia, Kaduna, and Kano. They are presently going through an assessment phase, where the deadline for this assessment phase is on the 30th, and by the 21st of June, the final core states, which will be 4, will be selected, and the others become associate states. Next slide. So project partners. Now for us to have a structure which can work and we can improve the management of some of this waste and also consider even product design. Nigeria is not really a producing country for many of these components. So we look more into the management of the lifespan and the management of the waste. We have to work on the extended producer responsibility. So UNIDO actually supported the government of Nigeria to establish the EPR, which started with the electronic and e-waste sector, EPRON. So now we will go back, we will support the PROs, the producer responsibility organizations, for the e-waste sector and that of the battery sector, ARBR. We are already engaging them, and we are already looking at their, first to look at their structure as PROs, then to look at the operations of their member companies, and also how government's legal and regulatory framework is operating around their operations. So then the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria, we've seen many operators, developers of mini grids here today. There has to be some sort of coordination between the developers and probably the EPR, or the regulations has to cover we can even start from green procurement, whereby right from procuring, installation, we are already thinking about the management of some of these materials. So then the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. So we also have actors, private sector associate partners. I have a list there. And part of that list is also the informal sector. This is a developing country whereby you have the activities of the informal sector. Actually, the stocks are there, but many of them are collected by the informal sector. And that is why they are also not getting to you, the recycling facilities. So just the way we are working with some of the other sectors, like the plastics, the food and beverage sector for the waste plastics, and working with that, we can also work with the waste battery sector and waste electrical and electronic sector. So we find a way to organize the informal sector in a way that gradually we formalize them, and we train them, we build their capacity, and we also get them integrated into the EPR system. Next slide. So there are 3 outputs to this project. The first output is strengthening policy and regulatory framework for enabling circular economy principles and practices, especially for used energy equipment, and its implementation capacity is supported. So this is where I've been explaining that we will work with government to look at the existing legal and regulatory frameworks, policies, regulations, guidelines. There are some policies already existing: national policy on solid waste management, national policy on plastic waste management, national policy on hazardous waste management. We will look at some of these, do some assessments around them, identify the gaps, develop recommendations, and the ones that we can support with the implementation of these recommendations, we will do them. So we are presently engaging with the federal government institutions on this. Output 2 is strengthening enabling institutions at the federal and state level is supported. So we will work more with the states. The actions are in the states. So we will work very much with the state governments. We will work with the industry associations. We will work with the producer responsibility organizations. And also we want to work with, on innovation. So we will work with research and development organizations, universities, to see if we can get further solutions, what further innovations from the universities and incubation centers, TVET programs, and the likes. And output 3 is working directly with the industry. So here we will engage directly with the industry, do some assessments, carry out some RECP, resource efficiency and cleaner production, incorporate some circular economy models and practices, but we are also going to open up an environment, a call for applications for innovations from the industries, whereby we will also look at various technologies, various processes that we can use to improve circularity for these products, for these waste products in the power sector. So we will concentrate quite on this output 3, working directly with businesses and industries. Next slide. So I've explained many of these, but we are also going to organize a lot of awareness programs. So we have organized both with with federal, states, and the businesses. So we realize that a lot of people don't even know that some of the things they are doing is wrong. So for example, if we have to support the country to carry out separation at source for some of these products, or also encourage the recycling companies on collection models from businesses or from homes and everything. So we are going to organize a lot of awareness program. So, and part of the assessment we are carrying out with the state governments is, so right now they are doing their own internal assessment as well, where they will tell us what they have in terms of legal instruments. So we will now sit down with them after the selection of the core states and the associate and determine what are the priority needs of each of individual states. So states will be on case-by-case basis. We will not treat them generally and help them prioritize what is needed and help them implement. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. Yes. So output 2, I've mentioned, I've gone through many of these, so I won't repeat. Next slide. So output 3, I've also gone through this, but just to, so the process at which we will use is one, with demonstration of business models in e-way. So we will issue, like I said, we will issue a call for proposal, then we'll do the selection of pilot companies. I'm sure many of the companies that have attended this conference would also apply. Then factory assessments and baseline data collection of pilot companies, and pilot company implementation. One thing we also, next slide, one thing we also want to help the government with is developing a data platform whereby the country is able to develop data from collection of, starting from the states and aggregated at the federal. So we are going to help them develop this data structure. So this is the timelines that we are looking at for the implementation of this project between 2024 and 2026. Next slide. Next slide. So these are just the timelines. So we would also organize some knowledge sharing and study tours to facilities, to governments that are ahead of Nigeria. Next slide. So this is the structure of the project. The project has a National Steering Committee, which is co-chaired by the Federal Ministry of Environment and the European Union, with the Secretariat at UNIDO. Like I mentioned, the European Union is the donor. The project management unit is at UNIDO, the national institutions, Federal Ministry of Environment, NESRIA, Federal Ministry of Power, Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. Then you have the state governments. Then we work with international and national experts and also the industrial associations. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, I think we can all go up now for the closing remarks that are already about to start now in the main room. Thank you. Hello. Yes.